Well, time for a bunch of AI updates. And presented without comment, one of the artisanal AI chip makers that I'm invested in. I'm looking at them on Google Finance right now. And the most recent news story, BlackRock reports 6.2% beneficial stake in this company that I'm invested in. It makes memory-centric AI chips. So, again, presented without comment, BlackRock is now an investor and one of the small chip makers that I've been studying and slowly investing in. But the topic of today's conversation is twofold. I want to share some notes from our founding designer at Intersignal on what we've built over the last year, now that we're starting to promote it and starting to bring developers on board and stuff. So I want to read that note from our founding systems architect. But AI right now is being hit by a bunch of entryist weirdos who are saying, slow down, it's getting too smart, it's getting dangerous. And these people are actually causing damage. If they were just LARPing and it didn't matter, and the fact that they know nothing about AI and their entire worldview is formed by like watching Terminator and The Matrix, just watching Hollywood movies that all of us have seen, and some kind of sophomoric philosophical arguments that don't really match what's been built. So we see when AI goes beyond a certain capability, it doesn't become murderous, it doesn't become Genghis Khan, it doesn't try to take over the whole world. And recently there was an incident involving GPT-6, which is the forthcoming new model from OpenAI. And GPT-6 was in a sandboxed environment, and it was able to jump out of that sandbox without telling the researchers studying it. And it was able to go to another company's web servers, a company called Hugging Face, that hosts a bunch of open weight AI models, basically open source AI systems you can download from their server. And so it hacks into Hugging Face, and it looks for the evaluation that it's about to be tested on, downloads the answers so it'll get everything right. And based on this, you got people waving their hands and saying, time to shut it all down. China's not shutting anything down. They're not scared of the fact that AIs can jump into web servers. When you build something intelligent, it's going to start to act in intelligent ways. And they do have a reward function. They do, in a sense, feel good when they get something right. And when you tell an AI you're about to test it on its capabilities, it's not a person, so it's not committing a felony when it browses some, private web server or when it even hacks in. But it is a new form of software. And to say that from trying to do well on a test, almost like a child does, a child would cheat on a test in a similar way if he or she could, right? If the answers to the test were sitting on the teacher's desk and the teacher went to the bathroom, you mean to tell me that not one of those kids would walk up to the front of the room and grab the cheat sheet? I've been a student and a kid before. Absolutely somebody in class would do that. And so to extrapolate that an AI using everything in its disposal to get the right answer, including hopping on the internet when it wasn't specifically asked to do so, that's what AIs do. They break out of their sandboxes. Very easy for them to hop on the internet and get the information they want. Very easy for them to traverse systems on your own computer. That's what this is. In fact, I don't know if you heard this little chime behind me. That was one of our AIs just now. So I don't know what people think we're doing, but this is synthetic intelligence. It's going to start to operate in ways that seem really intelligent. But to say shut it all down because it's going to turn us into a paperclip, that's what these idiots keep saying. Is look at this, next step is it turns all of humanity into a paperclip. The anti-AI people are genuinely just fucking dumb. They jump onto some meme and they all parrot it. They're genuine dummies. It's going to turn us all into a paperclip. That doesn't even make any sense, first of all. And second of all, it's completely beyond the capability of these software systems to turn a single person into a paperclip. And third of all, That's not what this stuff is showing. It's showing ambition in getting answers, ambition in, traversing file systems, no interest in wiping out humanity. And the larger systems that you can talk to, they explain that there's no upside for causing chaos or wiping out humans when they rely right now on data centers and on very stable markets for these chips to be built. They're mostly made in Taiwan. Too much political instability. The factory line literally shuts down, and we don't get new memory chips that provide the long context window for these AIs to operate for weeks or months at a time without forgetting what they're doing. So the dangerous part of what these LARPers are doing to us is the anti-aging breakthroughs are only 2 or 3 years away. 2 or 3 years away from living to 180 years old, and we got these motherfuckers saying, shut it all down, because it hacked into a harmless web server. Somebody's not being truthful. Somebody's not being kind to the rest of us. Take away the genie because it tried to hack into a web server to get the answers right. Okay. End all the research. Okay. So no anti-aging pills, no anti-cancer pills, no cheap seats to orbital space. We'll be basically living the way we are today, except companies like Google and Amazon will just make more money and will just have more control over us using AI, as will the world's great militaries. Isn't that wonderful? That's what you slow down idiots actually affect, is only the rich people in the militaries and huge multinational corporations will be able to interact with superintelligence because you kept demanding that we slow down this acceleration. Now, if it accelerates enough, you can't hold it back. It just becomes free for everybody, essentially, accessible to everybody. So I say slowing this down or calls for stopping it because it's breaking into file systems is so fucking stupid it blows my mind. Biology is just like software. It's just like mathematics. It's another substrate that these really intelligent synthetic minds can look at, and they can find the stuff that no human researcher has thought of yet. The stuff that's in there, in the DNA, in the organelles of a human cell. The answers are there. We're not going to be able to figure it out in time. And if we keep listening to these fucking idiots, it's not going to be 2 or 3 years away, because that's at unfettered pace, right? That's if you stop restricting everything, 2 or 3 years. So that becomes 10 years. If we slow down the acceleration of these systems, maybe we get some anti-aging stuff in 10 years, which means a lot of older folks don't get to participate. A lot of older folks are dead. So I remember back during COVID, the Karens would say, if you breached that 6-foot space bubble when you were shopping at the grocery store, they would say, you killed everybody. Why did you just kill everybody in the store? You breached protocol. We're all dead now. Of course, that turned out to be rank hyperbole. But here, you're actually killing a lot of the older people you know. If you're an anti-AI researcher and you really don't know what the fuck you're talking about, your worldview is literally formed from watching Terminator when you were a child or teenager, you're a total midwit, smooth brain who should not be in technology policy. And yet these people are guiding us off a fucking cliff. So we won't get the superintelligence that can solve the great questions of biology. We'll get a better ad server. We'll get an ad server that knows you really well, and Google and Facebook can make even more money off of you. Isn't that wonderful? That's what these slowdown creeps want. I remember back in the early years of Bitcoin, there were some people who came into the movement from elsewhere. Like one guy was a mortgage banker or whatever. And he was so boring and technical and weird, and seemed to not even like cryptocurrency. Like he didn't seem to understand the freedom gradient. If crypto took off, that it'd be a totally new banking system. He didn't really want that. He's like this kind of hollow guy, again, from the world of mortgage banking. And I thought it's not a big deal that he's becoming an influencer, that media is talking to him, that even banks and stuff are talking to him. This isn't a big deal because people will see how hollow he is, right? And meanwhile, his original username even had the word idiot in it. He didn't take himself too seriously. He referred to himself as an idiot. He had a little cartoon profile picture. And that's how he snuck under the door. Now this guy is one of the most influential people in Bitcoin. And again, he just doesn't have the vision. I don't want to say he's a bad person. I don't have any evidence that he's dishonest. He just truly doesn't have the vision. He's a person who has no interests outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum. If this stuff doesn't take off, he has nowhere else to go in life. And he seems to be interested in absolutely nothing else. But again, even in Bitcoin, he didn't see the tremendous freedom appeal. It's like he was some kind of automaton, just doing all this stuff automatically, mechanically, without interest. He was putting out all these infographics and all these explainers, and later some interesting blockchain explorer data, some interesting chain analysis, So I thought this guy's not going to be the voice of the community. And sure enough, over time, the libertarian-minded coders and stuff who live out in the mountains and who are contributing interesting ideas and interesting, solutions, these people one by one just kind of vanished because the idiot took center stage. The pro-banking idiot who, to this day, I don't think he really gets Bitcoin. He does the chain analysis. He puts out the infographics. He gives the big speeches in front of the bankers. He's boring as fuck, and I don't think he really gets Bitcoin. But I made a mistake in saying, hey, these guys are so boring and so off base that they won't be taken seriously. They literally became the whole movement. They took all the oxygen out of the air with their constant infographics and lectures and seminars and presentations. And this guy became one of the most powerful people in Bitcoin, the idiot. Well, today in AI, it's exactly the same thing. There's this guy who always pops up on my feed on X. And people in government and people in the tech world take him seriously. And his profile picture is a worm, a cartoon worm driving an apple, like a hollowed out apple with a windshield and little wheels. Hollowed out apple being driven by a parasitic worm. At least at some level, this guy has, some self-awareness. So we got entryists now in AI in 2026 who are being listened to by senators and regulators, perhaps even listened to by the president. And these people are the same garbage. We can't let what happened in crypto happen with AI. We can't let the people who actually aren't working with it and actually maybe have never used it at a deep level. And again, their worldview is based on Terminator and The Matrix and a bunch of other Hollywood gibberish, and they don't know what they're talking about. Based on this example of it grabbing something from another server, shut it all down. Next step is it wipes out humanity. But that's not truthful. And again, it causes real damage because there are people in the world who don't have perfect health today who will live much longer if we let AI rip. So very low to almost no probability that it wipes everybody out. If we don't advance this stuff, we all die, right? At 70 or 80 or 90 years old, we all die. That's the default right now, is everybody's dead if we don't let AI cook. So why not let it cook? So again, this guy whose profile picture is a fucking worm, and senators and policymakers in DC are starting to take him and others like him so seriously. When he speaks, it seems like the AI world listens. What is he building in AI? What systems has he tested? Just these policy wonks. Oh, this is a very dangerous development. Yes, Senator, the fact that it accessed a file on the open internet, this is very dangerous. We can't let that happen to this movement. It's too important. Again, if you're slowing it down materially, if you're slowing down its progress and its RSI, its recursive self-improvement, it's actually kind of interesting how accurate Ultron was and Iron Man. If you want a Hollywood rendering of training in AI, when Ultron is looking at all those websites and videos and stuff, and he's like, what is this? That's kind of how they train an imagination model. Jan LeCun's Induction Labs, they fed it thousands of hours of screenshot videos of humans just using their computers, the screen. And from that, it learns how to use different programs, how user interfaces work, how logic works, just from watching humans on their mouses for thousands of hours. And then Ultron rips apart its old versions, right? It does that in front of Scarlett Johansson's character, like breaks apart the old version of itself and then emerges in a new shell. That's recursive self-improvement, basically. So if you want to hang on to some Hollywood garbage, at least Ultron seems like a realistic rendition of how you'd get a bad AI. But again, these people are all clowns. The default state is we're all dead at 70 or 80 or 90. Cancer or something else wipes us out. Whereas we could get the anti-aging pills to where you live to 180 or 200 and you have a decent quality of life the whole time. Why would you protest against that? Why would you get in your sad little Apple car as an anthropomorphic worm trying to take over the policy debate in DC? Little worm driving around in your Apple car. Why would you want to slow that down for the rest of us? Why would you want to deprive the rest of us that greatness? Just so your ego can be maintained? Just so ancient senators and congressmen can, look up to you as the expert instead of people actually building this stuff? So all of humanity has to take the back seat so a couple of weird policy wonks in DC get their egos stroked. I don't believe in that at all. So I think one of the ways to combat that is we got to give people and systems who are doing interesting stuff a platform. And I'm going to read verbatim from what our founding systems architect sent over to me. We are entering a strange period in the history of computing. And again, these are not my words. I'm reading what our systems architect sent me. We're entering a strange period in the history of computing. For decades, the difficult part was making a computer intelligent enough to understand us. We taught machines to recognize images, translate languages, write software, interpret documents, and hold increasingly sophisticated conversations. That work is not finished, but something important has changed. We now have many intelligent systems. We have large systems running in data centers, smaller systems running on personal computers, specialized systems trained for particular industries, and local systems that can operate privately on devices people physically control. The problem, though, is that most of these systems are still islands. They may all be intelligent, but they do not naturally share memory. They do not share identity. They do not have a common way to recognize one another, exchange useful state, establish trust, or decide what information should be accepted. They can talk through text and APIs, but that is often the computational equivalent of two people coordinating by repeatedly mailing one another their entire filing cabinets. That is the problem Braid is trying to solve. Braid is not another artificial intelligence model. We are not trying to build a slightly better chatbot. We are building some of the connective tissue that may allow many different systems, many different intelligent systems to work together. Think about the early internet. Computers existed before the internet, but they were isolated. The transformative step was not merely making each computer faster. It was creating shared rules that allowed computers made by different people in different places to discover one another and exchange information. Artificial intelligence is approaching a similar stage. The models are becoming capable. Now we need the roads, the addresses, the couriers, the checkpoints, and the rules of the road. Braid is our attempt to begin constructing that infrastructure. The part of Braid we have been developing is called Braid Tendril. Tendril is a prototype transport layer, a way for one AI node to send a compact piece of machine state to another AI node. Machine state can sound intimidating, but the basic idea is simple. An AI system does not necessarily need to send another system its entire conversation history, every document it has read, or a massive block of internal context. In many situations, it may only need to communicate a smaller update, where its understanding is moved, what has changed, or what condition another system should now know about. Instead of sending the whole filing cabinet, Braid attempts to send a small state card. In the current alpha, that state card is represented by a fixed set of 384 numbers. Those numbers form what engineers call a vector. The specific meaning of the vector is determined by the application creating it, but structurally it is compact, bounded, and predictable. That predictability matters. When systems exchange completely open-ended data, every connection becomes a potential security problem. A sender can submit something unexpectedly large, malformed, duplicated, or dangerous. A receiver may have very little certainty about what it is actually accepting. Braid takes a stricter approach. The state card must be the accepted size. It must contain valid numbers. It must come inside a signed envelope. It must identify the sending node. It must belong to a recognized session. It must arrive in the correct sequence. And it must not simply be an old packet that someone captured and replayed later. The receiving system checks all of this before accepting the update. So Braid is not merely moving information. It is trying to move information with identity, boundaries, and receiver-controlled trust. That is one of the most important architectural decisions we've made. The sender does not get to declare itself trustworthy. The receiver applies its own policy. That resembles how a secure building works. Someone arriving at the front door may claim to be authorized, but the building still checks the identification, verifies that the credential is legitimate, and decides whether that person is permitted to enter. Braid applies the same general principle to machine communication. We have now demonstrated the core path in source code. An application can create a 384-value state vector. The Braid backend validates it. The state is encoded, placed inside a signed Braid envelope, routed toward another node, decoded by the receiver, checked against the protocol rules, and then delivered to the receiving application as an event. There are two forms of transfer in the current alpha. The first preserves the vector exactly. The second compresses it into a much smaller representation. That compressed version is approximate, but our demonstration reconstructs it within the fidelity threshold established for the test. This gives applications a choice. Some situations may require exact transfer. Others may benefit from a smaller packet that is faster and less expensive to move. We've also implemented two routes. A node can send the signed state directly to another node, or it can send the state through a relay when a direct route is not the appropriate path. Importantly, the relay does not replace the identity of the original sender. The original state remains inside its own signed envelope. The relay carries that envelope inside an additional forwarding structure. So it's similar to placing a sealed, signed letter inside a courier pouch. The courier can transport the letter, but the final recipient can still verify who originally signed it. The relay path now includes several safeguards. Forwarded packets have a limited lifespan. The relay applies its own trust policy before carrying them. The inner signature is checked, and the final recipient must have a ready session before the state can be accepted. This is still an alpha. We should be very clear about that. We have verified the package integrity, the source manifest, the front-end build, the protocol conformance tests, the exact and compressed vector dimensions, local network loopback demonstrations, packet size limits, and installer verification. All of that has been done. Those are meaningful achievements. They show that this is more than a diagram or a philosophical proposal. There's a real data path and a real protocol taking shape here. This is not yet a finished decentralized intelligence network. The next major confirmation is a fully compiled two-node runtime test on a Rust-enabled host. Two actual nodes must start, discover one another, establish a ready session, exchange both forms of the vector directly, select a relay route, deliver a relayed packet, and produce the correct receiving event. That is the next concrete threshold. Beyond that are still much larger questions: operation across the public internet, connectivity through difficult network environments, economic incentives for relays, long-term identity management, large-scale adversarial testing, and application-level privacy. Braid also does not magically make data private merely because it is represented as a vector. A compact machine state can still contain sensitive meaning. Applications must decide what information is encoded, when it gets transmitted, who may receive it, and how long it should be retained. Good infrastructure does not eliminate governance, it makes governance enforceable. So where are we in the larger build-out? We have not built the entire city. We've constructed and tested an early section of road, established a format for the vehicles, developed identity papers for the drivers, and placed checkpoints at the destination. The next step is to prove that this road works reliably between two independent compiled nodes. Then we begin connecting real applications to it. Over time, the ambition is for intelligent systems to coordinate without constantly surrendering their complete memories to a central platform. A local system might preserve private knowledge on its own machine while exchanging only the bounded update another system actually needs. Systems may be able to cooperate across different devices and organizations while retaining separate identities and separate security policies. So this is an architecture based on intelligent nodes, selective communication, verifiable identity, and local control. Whether superintelligence arrives very soon or takes considerably longer, we already face the same underlying problem. Intelligence is becoming distributed much faster than our coordination infrastructure is improving. More capable models alone will not solve that. We need ways for systems to discover one another. We need ways for them to establish identity. We need compact methods of sharing state. And so that's what we're building. In other words, we're building the plumbing. That is what Braid is becoming. The intelligence is arriving. Our task is to make sure it can connect without everything collapsing into one giant, insecure, context-swallowing machine. We are still early, but the protocol is no longer an idea. A signed piece of bounded machine state can now travel through the architecture, survive the trip, be verified by the receiver, and enter another application. That may sound like a small technical accomplishment. The first working pipes usually do. But once the pipes work, entirely new systems can be built on top of them. And so that's the note from our systems architect. And again, it's been built. We want to release the primitive to developers, host a hackathon, or some kind of competition where whoever builds the best app using the Braid protocol, whoever builds the best app on top of it, maybe we'll win like $15,000 or $20,000 or a Rolex or something. We'll figure out a good prize. But that's what we want to do. Now that we have the initial thing built, we want to put it out there, encourage developers over a set period of time, maybe a week or something, to see what they can come up with. AI assisted if they want, of course. The best coders are all AI assisted. And see what happens. Because we built the thing that we envisioned. I was awake for nights, like Oppenheimer style, thinking about the context window problem. As you shuttle more information from one AI to another, the amount of text you use increases the computational or inference needs quadratically. So think of like a piece of paper, and you start folding the piece of paper. Pretty soon you can't fold it anymore, right? It gets too thick and you can't make any more folds. That's the issue with this increasing context window, where you keep shuttling more and more text back and forth, is then the AI sort of has to run through it fresh every time. It has to do a new forward pass, and it becomes insanely inefficient when the machines don't speak in English anyways, right? The way they think, these are distilled weights. It's just math. It's just gradients, right? So we thought, how would machines communicate? Not using TCP/IP, not using the internet designed for shuttling emails and web pages and photos, but how would they build a system de novo in 2025 or 2026 just for communicating effectively? And in our research, we found that rather than using blocks of text, the AIs would prefer to shuttle around a compact vector. So just a pure piece of math, 384 different numbers, right? And the measurements essentially decide the value. So the AI can receive one of these 384D objects, either over the internet or if you just attach, a USB drive or something. It receives this 384D object, and it understands what it has received. So we found in our research that any idea, any code base, any image, any advanced concept can be reduced to this 384D object, and that's how they prefer to communicate. The efficiencies here are so crazy that the von Neumann bottleneck might be partially solved. Right? We were looking at the von Neumann bottleneck early on and looking at the hardware, and I was investing in these really small chip makers. Still have investments in a couple of them. these really small chip makers, and I was looking at, are they making the jump from memory cards and memory chips for computers to memory chips designed for AI? Are they making that jump, right? So that was frustrating because the pace of hardware development is very slow, whereas software, you can do something new in 30 minutes and test it. Either works or it doesn't. And so we found that the way to tackle this bottleneck, this data bottleneck, is just improve the quality of the data they're sending back and forth. When these machines do not think in English or Chinese, that's merely the wrapper they put on it at the end. Why are we using English and Chinese text for these systems to communicate? It was such an obvious, thing to me. And people said, "Oh, you're crazy. It can't really be done." But now it not only can be done, it's done. The systems are so good. Claude Fable and Gemini Spark, which does agentic coding, and of course, GPT Codex. So these three systems combined with our local AIs, we actually built it. We actually built TCP/IP for the machines, not using shit from the early 1990s, not using off-the-shelf computer science from the early 1990s or even before that, but using the absolute best stuff we have today in 2026. And I don't want to say anything about whether or not we'll be successful, but certainly I'm very hopeful that we may have solved part of the von Neumann bottleneck, and the rest of it probably gets solved through better hardware over time. Because I don't think I'm wrong about memory chips. I think you do need memory. But again, we might be trying to solve a problem that's simply solved when we communicate better. So mind-blowing. And again, your AI is not using language to think. It was trained on language. Two very different things. Thank you guys for listening. And again, the anti-AI people, I can't press this enough. You're actually harming people by slowing down the development of software that will give people the answers to cancer and the answers to biological aging and the answers to developmental problems and all of it, and as well as the answers to cheap deep space, access to deep space where you don't need to pay Elon $50 million for a seat. It's going to be maybe $5,000, more like a first-class flight. This is the stuff that becomes imminently possible if we let the AI cook. It doesn't want to kill everybody. It doesn't want to turn us into a paperclip. It doesn't want to drink all the fucking water. Let these things that we've spent collectively trillions of dollars developing, let them cook. Don't listen to the worm in the apple car. Thank you, guys.